My name is Noel Joseph Terence Montgomery Needham. I'm from Great Britain. My Chinese name is Li Yue Se. I have been to China 9 times in my life, and I am eternally grateful for everything I have learned there. Everywhere I have been able to witness its ancient spirit of science and technology. I feel privileged to have seen firsthand this wonderful creativity, the brightest of minds and the noblest of spirits. From this war-torn Asian country burst vitality that borders on the miraculous. It is in this land where such wisdom abounds that the second act of my life began. The University of Cambridge in the UK is one of the most prestigious universities in the world, producing numerous luminaries in the 8 centuries since its establishment. Fourteen British Prime Ministers and 121 Nobel laureates have worked or studied here. The very bricks, walls, grass and trees seem imbued with their spirit. There's a popular Cambridge tale concerning 3 trees. Over 300 years ago, Isaac Newton pondered the question of gravity under this apple tree, laying the foundations for a revolution in scientific thinking. Over 400 years ago, the poet John Milton, who at the time was a student at Cambridge, might have composed his first poems under this mulberry tree. Milton today is recognized as one of the greatest figures in English literature. The third tree is this Bodhi tree. Sacred in Asia for its association with Buddhism, it has its own distinctive Oriental character. Nearly 33 years ago, the ashes of one of the university's great scholars were laid to rest near this tree. We are talking about one of the great figures in Cambridge's recent history, Joseph Needham. A conduit between China and the West to rank with Marco Polo or Matteo Ricci. Thanks to him, a new interpretation of science and civilization in China was triggered in the Western world in the 20th century. This is the Needham Research Institute in Cambridge. Its architecture expresses the influence of Chinese culture, and it is an academic hub for the study of the history of science, technology and civilization in East Asia. John Moffat is the head of the Institute's library. He is familiar with all the materials held here. Under his guidance, photos from over a half-century ago will be unveiled to reveal Needham's early connection with China.
那这就是李约瑟博士抗战时期在中国照的1000多张照片，照了各种各样的科学机构，还有实验室，还有一些著名的人物，就是胚胎学专家童迪周和他的夫人。这是四川照的一些照片，有4位比较有名的，这位是傅斯年中央研究院的，这个是梁思成，这位是李济，非常著名的考古学家，这位是李方奎，是一个文字学专家。这是当时那个冯友兰在成都的时候，他们好像在一个茶馆里面开个小会，这就是那个时候的中国。
These photos capture Needham's time in China and his friends, a group of China's most influential contemporary scholars. In the tumult of the 1940s, how could an Englishman travel all over China, visit the most brilliant minds of that era, and maintain lifelong friendships with many of them? Everything originated in an extraordinary trip more than half a century ago. A C-47 Skytrain flies from India to Sichuan over the Hump, the light-hearted name the pilots give to the Himalayas. The year is 1943, and the plane must deal not only with mountains and weather, but also Japanese fighter planes at the end of its route. One man, oblivious to those dangers, is busy photographing everything he can see. The man was Joseph Needham. A leading British scientist, Needham was on a special mission. The Imperial Japanese Army had been trying to subdue China for over a decade. The Chinese had put up a determined resistance in the face of brutal aggression. The Japanese had blown up the Nankai University in Tianjin. The universities in Beijing were looted. Almost all universities across the area they held encountered a similar fate. Before the war, China had 108 colleges and universities. By the time Needham arrived, 90% of them had been damaged. It was no longer possible to study in peace. To preserve the seeds of knowledge, teachers and students from Peking University, Tsinghua and Nankai universities moved thousands of miles to the southeastern city of Kunming. There they formed the National Southwest Associated University. The University of Nanking and Yunqing University moved to Chengdu. Part of Central University and Chiaotong University moved to Chongqing. Tongji University, Wuhan University and Zhejiang University relocated to Lichuang and Leshan in Sichuan and Meitan in Guizhou respectively. With China in crisis, Chinese intellectuals acted to save their country's intellectual resources by moving inland. The protection of schools, temples and other cultural sites in war is a basic humanitarian principle. The Japanese destruction of these facilities was a clear breach of civilized norms. To destroy education is to destroy culture. To destroy culture is a form of genocide, a crime against humanity.
In the UK, there was a tremendously strong response to the Japanese invasion of China. I mean, enormous sums of money were collected by the Sino-British Fellowship Trust and so on. Huge sums of money to help people in China in the face of the Japanese invasion. So it is quite possible that this again was part of that same fellow feeling, that sense that Japan is destroying and we must try and build.
At this moment, the British government decided to lend a hand and send someone to investigate the situation of education and scientific research in wartime China. This person must know Chinese, have a strong scientific background, and enjoy a high academic reputation. Joseph Needham from Cambridge University was just such a figure. Needham was 43 years old at the time. The author of Chemical Embryology in 3 volumes, he was a leading authority in the field of biochemistry. This brick building belongs to the Department of Biochemistry, University of Cambridge, where Needham was based. The building houses pictures, archives and memorabilia connected to its Nobel laureates. Frederick Hopkins, the founder of the department, and Richard Henderson, a pioneer in electron microscopy, are among them.
I'm standing in the Department of Biochemistry and I'm standing in front of a set of photographs of 10 scientists who've worked here over the years who've been awarded Nobel Prizes, either in chemistry or in physiology and medicine. And that record reflects the achievements of Frederick Gowland Hopkins, who essentially set up the Department of Biochemistry in Cambridge.
An exhibition board features other equally outstanding graduates, even though they weren't recognized with the Nobel Prize. Prominent among them are the names of Joseph Needham and Dorothy Moyle Needham, his first wife. They worked in the same department and co-authored papers together, becoming the first husband and wife couple elected as Fellows of the Royal Society. Needham was supreme in his academic career. Had he stayed in Cambridge, he would not only enjoy a comfortable life, but might have won a Nobel Prize. What took him instead to a war-ravaged China? Like his contemporaries Hemingway and Bethune, Needham had socialist leanings. In 1937, he supported the Cornford Maclaurin Fund to help young revolutionaries and scholars.
Needhams, who were very active politically, they were really quite left-wing, but they were involved in all sorts of things, from supporting the Labour Party to things like Amnesty International and Save the Children and such things. So there was an enormous interest and enthusiasm for political issues.
The The Needhams were also free-spirited in affairs of the heart, and it was the arrival of another woman in Joseph's life that brought about its dramatic transformation. This was once the campus of Jinling College. Founded in 1913, it was the first women's college in China. Between 1919 and 1951, a total of 999 female students graduated from here. They were called the 999 Roses. One of the roses was Lu Guijun. After graduating from this most beautiful campus in the East, she attended Peiping Union Medical College to study chemical pathology.
She was quite remarkable in many respects. She was born in Nanjing and she was the daughter of an apothecary, and she was very fortunate in being born in Nanjing because she was able to go to Jinling College, which was a very broad establishment which is still flourishing to this day.
After her studies, Lu Guijun went to Shanghai to teach. She was also madly in love. But the war not only destroyed her research environment, it took the life of her beloved. Lu Guijun wanted to leave this sadness behind when she came to hear of the Cornford Maclaurin Fund. Also in 1937, Lu Guijun boarded a ship in Shanghai to head for Britain. She was given a grant from the Cornford Maclaurin Fund to study in the Department of Biochemistry at Cambridge. The voyage took 2 months. Lu Guijun wondered who she'd meet in Cambridge. On the way from China, knowing of the books he had written, I imagined I would meet an old man with a bushy white beard. Down the tennis court road, 33-year-old Lu Guijun walked into Cambridge's Department of Biochemistry for the first time. She nervously climbed up this spiral staircase and knocked on the door of the lab. This was the Joseph Needham that Lu Guijun met in the summer of 1937. His lab coat was flecked with holes made by acid burns. Wearing glasses and with uncombed hair, he was young and highly focused. This was Lu Guijun as seen by Needham. "Hello, nice to meet you. I'm Joseph," Needham said to the petite Chinese woman. Then he turned back to continue with his work. Lu Guijun's research topic was muscle mechanics. Needham's wife Dorothy was an authority in this field. Her book, Machina Canis, remains a classic of muscle mechanics research today. She became Lu Guijun's supervisor.
Dorothy was established working, in fact, on the subject of muscle biochemistry, how muscles worked. And so Dorothy's career under Hopkins developed to the extent that she became one of the first women to be elected to the Royal Society, and he and Dorothy were the first husband and wife partnership to be elected Fellows of the Royal Society.
This is the common room of the Department of Biochemistry. The Needhams and Lu Guijun would have sat here to chat. Lu Guijun may have told them about the incredible inventions of ancient China, including herbal anesthesia and meteorological instruments. This perhaps inspired Needham's great curiosity towards China.
I can't think of anyone else like him. He's very much a kind of character on his own. He did have a kind of tremendous air of the schoolboy about him, that his haircut was very schoolboyish, and he dressed in a very kind of simple English way, which was quite schoolboyish, and he had these passions, and I think for people to be passionate about things, it is with an almost schoolboyish passion that people grow out of such enthusiasms, but he never lost that fantastic enthusiasm and interest in anything that caught his eye.
Needham became fascinated by China's technology and civilization, but to explore it properly, he needed to learn the Chinese language. Encouraged by Lu Guijun, Needham began to draw pictures of Chinese characters. This Oriental language opened a new door for Needham, drawing him into a different world. Needham decided to study Chinese seriously, and Lu Guijun became his teacher. Naturally, Needham would later speak Chinese with a strong Nanjing accent.
I看过李约瑟写的汉字，跟我姑妈写的汉字一个体，因为是她教的，是我姑妈教的，所以呢，那个字体啊都一样。
Lu Guijun thus wrote in the biography The First Half-Life of Joseph Needham. Even though it was like going back to the nursery to receive and reply to his artless Chinese letters, but little by little he gained the knowledge he sought and was launched on the way to understanding of Chinese texts of all ages. Needham described his joy in learning Chinese as a liberation, like going for a swim on a hot day, for it got you entirely out of the prison of alphabetical words and into the glittering crystalline world of ideographic characters. Throughout the fall of 1937, Needham spent all his spare time studying Chinese. People could often see a light in Needham's office deep into the night. In order to master Chinese, Needham created 3 dictionaries for himself that featured pronunciation, radicals, and grammar. He devised his own method of learning Chinese.
他是先按照部首来自己写每一个字，用了119种的部首来组织词典之类的一种工具书。这是索引告诉你部首是在哪个页，然后呢也有英文字的索引告诉你某一个字要到哪一页去找的。他这也有一本叫李约瑟的英汉字画书，这个本子呢是按照叫韵母来分的。然后呢第3个是叫做中国文理法，就是中文的语法的一个 自己的本子，这都是他自己弄的，所以他学中文也是很有自己的特色，也你可以看下了很大的功夫。从这可以看出来，他在右边就会填一个比较常用的部首在这儿，比如我们看天的部首下面有笑这个字，他先会写那个标音，跟现在的拼音不太一样，这个 HSIAO 就是笑，然后用英文写 to laugh or to smile， 然后有的时候也会加一个小句子之类，很可笑的，有的时候也写错了，这个横字也是错了，少了一个横，对吗？那个可也不对了，这是他刚开始学中文的时候做的。
With time, Needham learned to correctly mark the pronunciation of Chinese characters with transcriptions and use English to denote the meaning. For example, for the word dupe, his understanding was due to, because stupid. To learn Chinese at a deeper level, Needham found a professional teacher at the university.
当时嘛，他的老师叫哈伦教授，也是剑桥大学东方系的汉学教授。他的研究也完全是在古代汉语方面的，对，特别是官字啊这些先秦文献。
Under the guidance of Professor Halun, Needham devoted himself to the study of classical Chinese.
"这个很有意思，因为他当时学的主要是古代汉语嘛，先秦的官字。What is wisdom？ 何为知？何为知之？何如谓知之？何如谓之知乎？"
19 months later, people discovered that Needham had learned to read and write in Chinese. With the assistance of Lu Guijun, he could read Chinese classics in the university library. He even tried to write diaries in Chinese and used Chinese words when drafting letters. Lu Guijun herself took only 19 months to complete the 3-year program and obtain her doctoral degree. She also collaborated with Needham to publish a paper entitled A Contribution to the History of Chinese Dietetics. Although it was only a short historical research paper, it marked the first step in a partnership that would last over 50 years. It was also the initial spark for Needham's future magnum opus, the multi-volume Science and Civilization in China. The end of 1937 saw Lu Guijun's hometown of Nanjing pillaged in the Nanjing Massacre. The Japanese army raped and murdered tens of thousands of Chinese civilians. The world was shocked. Lu Guijun was heartbroken. Needham was also deeply concerned about the situation in China. When he learned that the British government was sending someone to China, Needham volunteered for the task. He wanted to help maintain civilization amidst the chaos and destruction. However, this major change worried his wife Dorothy. Abandoning a comfortable life in Cambridge for the war-torn East seemed a great adventure. Having lived with him for so many years, Dorothy knew very well that Needham was simultaneously a rational scholar and a passionate romantic.
It will say he's the son of Joseph Needham, who was a doctor, and he lived in Clapham Park, which is in London. His mother was Alicia Adelaide Needham, whose maiden name was Montgomery. It says which public schools. He went to some of the most impressive public schools in the country, Dulwich College and Oundle, and it details where he got his teaching and who was his teacher.
Needham's father was strict and sober. His mother was passionate about art. She even dressed him up as a pretty little girl when he was small. His parents' very different personalities led to endless quarrels in the household. They even couldn't agree upon what to call him. To avoid unpleasantness, Needham learned at a very young age to sign with whichever was their preferred name when writing to each of them.
You can see in that work the way in which Needham's life really went through a number of cycles, each of which really focused on kind of bridging things that seem a long way apart. So one of them was his interest in theology that we mentioned earlier, and his lifelong interest in trying to bring together notions of religion and theology and science.
Needham inherited from his parents the genes for both rigor and passion. As a scientist, Needham approached academic research with a rigorous attitude.
On an occasion, he showed me a drawing by Leonardo da Vinci, which showed a train of gears. And I'm an engineer, and so he said, Michael, I would like you to look at this train of gears, because I, Joseph, think that it goes round this way to begin with, and when it comes out through the other end of the gears, it's going that way. But Leonardo shows it going the wrong way. He said, would you give me an opinion? So I looked at it very carefully, and indeed what Joseph said was correct. And Joseph said, it destroys my faith in the man.
In addition to his academic talents, his passionate nature made Needham something of a maverick who was always attracting attention. Here he is seen at the wheel of a 6-cylinder sports car. Here he plays the accordion with a troupe of Morris dancers. Unlike the refined ballroom dance favoured by the middle and upper classes, Morris dancing represented a lively folk tradition more attuned to his values. From biochemistry to the history of science, from left-wing thought to Chinese Taoism, Needham's restless spirit kept discovering new interests. Lu Guizhen said this of why Needham suddenly turned his focus on China at the age of 37. In order to understand it, one has to know many curious traits of personality in the subject. The mixture of morality and unsuperstitious religion, of frugality and generosity, of scientific logic and openness to music and dance, of philosophical rigor and poetic exuberance. In fact, he has always exemplified the famous saying of Blaise Pascal, "The heart has its reasons, of which reason knows nothing." Following his impulses, at the end of 1942, Needham left Cambridge and headed east alone. It was a difficult and dangerous journey. In order to avoid the continental Europe occupied by the Nazis, the route was quite circuitous. He finally reached India by ship, where he boarded a plane to fly into China. Looking out through the aircraft's portholes, steep snow-covered peaks and deep mountain passes could be seen. This was the route over the Himalayas, the hump, the only route from into China from its Western allies. At 2 p.m. on February the 24th, 1943, the plane finally reached its destination, landing safely in Kunming. Like a newborn, Needham was curious about everything he saw. The fine details of life, often too familiar for Chinese people to notice, would instantly catch Needham's inquisitive attention. The mysteriousness and solemnity of this Oriental land instantly commanded his deepest respect. He noted how an ancient gardener performed elaborate grafting techniques on the plum tree, which differed from his father's earlier efforts on the apple tree in their Clapham back garden. A further thought struck him. Perhaps the Chinese not only did their grafting differently, but may have done this different kind of grafting very much earlier than anyone in Europe had done anything like it. He watched in awe as a clerk skillfully moved the beads on an abacus and was told that the abacus could be as ancient as the mountain peaks. Setting foot on Chinese soil for the first time, Needham kept recording his new discoveries with his camera. Poetic Chinese countryside, unique stone arch bridges, dragon backbone chain humps, water wheels. The shutter kept clicking away. Needham later recalled that, at that time, China was more or less a blank page in the history of world science and technology. this boundless curiosity towards Chinese technology and culture, Needham began his lifelong exploration of China. This was a momentous journey. Without this trip, there would be no decades of engagement with China. No volumes of science and civilization in China would be published, and the world would never have seen that overarching review of Chinese technology and civilization. The mysteries of the scientific world may be explored in a laboratory, but the truth of reality can't be grasped there. Needham came out of his lab and began to explore the real China.